Hi, everybody, and welcome. We're going to give it a few minutes for everybody to come in, just like we always do. So I hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon today. All right. I hope this dark background is okay. Does that look okay to you, John?
It does.
Okay, it's pretty dark. And it's a light subject, not a dark subject.
That's right. Liz, if you want to close that out for just a second and then add to the very last slide my contact information, that might be helpful.
Okay, let me see. Stop share. You can do that.
And while Liz does that, folks, I'll tell you a fun story while we're getting ready and getting ready to start. I had a chance to enjoy some wonderful fellowship with my daughter this weekend, and we little camping hack that we tried out. We read this online and we tried it, and it turned out it was pretty delicious. It breaks all kinds of nutritional laws, what I'm about to tell you. So, know that. But you all know about roasting marshmallows and making s'mores on an open fire. But did you know that you can roast Starburst candies on an open fire? And what happens is, if you like Starburst, what happens is they puff up just a little bit. And so when they're done, the inside is soft and gooey and the outside is still hard and crunchy. And so there's that hard, crunchy, soft, gooey the entire time you're eating the candy. Just, fun little fact for those of you while we're waiting for the rest of the attendees to show up for the webinar.
What does that taste like?
Well, if you've had a Starburst, it tastes like a Starburst, but just a little more chewy, gooey, crunchy.
That just doesn't sound right, John. Just doesn't sound right.
You know what? You're right, but it was delicious.
Okay. Well, so shall we get started? It's 12:03. So we'll just go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us today, everybody. Today we're going to talk about a topic that is really one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is how to build rapport with your kids. And especially our population of kids, sometimes it's difficult for them to trust those close communications. So we're going to talk about that today, the why and the how of all of that. So let's just jump right in there. Again, welcome. I'm Liz Simpson, and joining me is John Wilson. And we've just put our contact information at the last slide. So stay with us till the end and you'll have that. All right, here we go. Trying to find the easiest way to do this. There we go. So why is rapport an important topic for this population? And it all has to do with communication. There are some special things to note about having ADHD and how that affects your language usage, and expressively and receptively. So how you understand and use language. So we're going to talk about that in a little more detail coming up. And then the next thing I want to talk about is when we're talking to our kids, it's very important that we talk to them in age-appropriate language, because they're learning the language developmentally as they're developing. So it's important that the language becomes more complex so that the kids can learn and practice those skills. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. Development and social skills formation are extremely dependent on my communication skills, extremely dependent. Because if I don't have the communication skills to get my needs met, my development will sometimes slow down or become sporadic. And if I don't have the language skills I need for social interactions, then I become isolated, which also impacts my development. So really important about communication. It also supports my autonomy and independence, which is what we are shooting for as parents. We want our kids to be autonomous and independent. And it also helps our kids find their support systems, because I need to be able to communicate, be able to trust that communication and understand that communication in order to build my support systems. So it's really, really important. So let's talk about these special communication issues that might happen if you have attention deficit disorder or a learning disability. And what the research would say is that approximately 50% of this population has a communication disorder. Some are not identified, and most are not receiving specialized services. So I can tell you that for sure. As an old special ed teacher, unless a child had a fairly overt language disorder, so it was noticeable, the impairment was really noticeable, they typically didn't get speech and language services because those are limited resources. So even though they qualified, they should have, even if they did, it was on sort of a sporadic basis. Okay, but our kids are often not identified. So one thing that we know is fairly common in this population is nonverbal communication delay. And that means our kids have difficulty picking up on social cues, on nonverbal language. And so those skills can be specifically taught. Often it's using pictures or watching videos of interactions so that you can start to learn to read that nonverbal communication. But a lot of our kids had that delay. Now, articulation, pronouncing sounds and sound groups, we're usually better at. If you have an artic problem, usually you're going to get involved with a speech therapist fairly early. And I am not a speech therapist, so I don't pretend to be. This is just a sort of a 30-foot view of what goes on with our kids. Many of your kids may already be involved with a speech therapist, and that's fabulous. Fluency, speed, and clarity is what fluency is. And I have to tell you, my son is a very slow, methodic speaker. He's very clear. He is always, since a baby, never babbled, didn't talk till he was 2. And when he spoke, he was very clear and articulate, slow, clear, and articulate. My daughter, his sister, who's 2 years younger, to this day, if she is excited, she speeds her speech up so fast that it's very difficult to understand her. And so we have to get her to slow down. Things start blurring together, you know, and she's had to work on it most of her life to slow down. She can now read our social cues and see when we're kind of lost and slow it down on her own. But of all of this, for our kids, language delays are number 1. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I mean, expressive language, and specifically for this group, we're talking about the type of expressive language where you say, I know what I want to say, but I'm just not sure how to say it. It's in my head, but I just can't get it to come out. And then there's the receptive language delay, which is I hear what you're saying, but I'm really having trouble making meaning out of it. I heard the words, and so if you get me to repeat it, I will repeat what you said, but I'm still not able to make meaning out of it. So often what we need when it's a receptive problem, we need to say, I hear you, can you restate that in a different way? That would be what we would, a skill that we would give our kids, so that when they are feeling this way, I heard it, but I don't get it, that they can ask that speaker to restate what they're saying, okay? So, and at the same time, there's normal developmental stages that your child is going through. So language develops normally as your child develops. And as we know, development in general is not a smooth road. It starts and stops and slows and speeds up, and it just kind of goes like that. Well, again, as I've said in the past, one of my systems, like my physical system, might be just going, ooh, developing like crazy. But my language system might be going, oh, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there, and then I got to catch up. Okay, and that's what happens with most of our kids. And parenting, when we're parenting, parenting is developmental, and that's a whole nother webinar. But so when we're talking to our children, we have to respect their developmental level, and by that I mean that we don't want to be talking to a 13, 14-year-old as if they're a 4 or 5-year-old. And our kids are pretty good about calling us on that. And we really need to respect that, because there are different approaches given the different ages of your child. Okay. So how do we get this done? How does this happen? How does language and rapport, how do our kids learn those skills? And number one, you are their first language teacher. And you're almost their forever language teacher, okay? You are the one that they're going to be able to feel safe bouncing communication off of. And so, or they're not going to feel safe, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But you're the one that they can come to and practice these language skills with. And that means that as their language teacher, you need to be aware of if they have lagging skills, or if they're expressing a receptive language disorder. You need to be aware of that and help them learn those skills to fix it. Again, if your child already has a speech therapist, that's great. If they don't need one, that's great as well. I'm just telling you things that you can do at home as a parent to work on these issues, okay? So often what I have found with kids, and especially kids with ADHD and LD, if they don't want to talk to you, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is a lack of skill that they may or may not be aware of. It's just they sit down to talk, they get frustrated pretty easy, and then they're just done. Okay, so, and typically that is due to a lack of skills. The other is they don't want to be lectured or judged. And that's on us to review. That's on us to be mindful about. Are we talking to our kids most often talking in a one-way sort of authoritarian, direction giving? Is that how we're doing it? Because if it is, or if that's how they perceive it, then they're going to go around us. Okay. Often your child feels isolated. They have some issues, and we're going to talk about, the kinds of issues. Well, and we don't even have to identify it as an ADHD issue. If you have a 13-year-old, there are issues going on with them. They're 13. They're trying to make friends. All that's going on. And they're trying, and sometimes they feel isolated, like you're not going to understand because I'm 13 and you're, 45 or whatever. So you're not going to get it. And they don't talk to us. Sometimes they feel embarrassed because they don't know if the problem that they're having is a universal problem or just their problem, or maybe they did something they're sorry they did and aren't just quite sure how to apologize. So that happens. They'll avoid eye contact, avoid everything. And then again, sometimes they've just given up trying to talk to another person, in a meaningful way, because it just doesn't work out well. And that's when we start building some maladaptive other options for communication. John, did you want to say something?
Yeah. So, this is when it is most appropriate for you to try and channel your inner child.
Yes.
It's not so long ago that we can't remember why we didn't want to have uncomfortable conversations with our parents, and what would sort of create those avoidance issues, and so sometimes it's just absolutely critical to recognize that these are really valid reasons why kids might not want to engage with you in a conversation. And the really good news is there are solutions to each one of these challenges.
Exactly. And you've just given a foreshadowing of what is really one of the main points of this PowerPoint, which is walking in their shoes. And we'll talk about that pretty often as we go through. And so let's talk about this notion of age appropriateness, because this is hard for us as parents. I want to tell you, it is ridiculously hard for me as a parent, because my youngest child is an adult now. And developmentally, I need to speak to her in different ways than I spoke to her when she was 13, or when I spoke to her when she was 5. And sometimes that's so hard for me, because I want to give her direction. I want to tell her exactly what to do, all of that. And it's just inappropriate to approach it that way. Okay. So they require different interactions from us to improve and support their communication efforts as they develop. Okay, so if you're speaking to them, as I did, I have to say, last night when my daughter left to go to a bonfire, she's staying with us this summer and working with us. And the first things out of my mouth were, do you have your mask, or you're not going to go inside anywhere, or don't drink very much, And she went, Mom, who are you talking to? I'm an adult. I'm responsible. And I was like, I don't know where that came from. And of course, you do know where that comes from. It's right here. But so we have to be careful. When they are 0 to 9, our kids require, and it is developmentally appropriate for us to set direct, clear, consistent communication. We need to set boundaries. We need to be very clear on giving directions and stating rules and how to uphold those rules. So we're laying the groundwork when they're 0 to 9, and we are the authority figure, no doubt about it. So we can come from that place, and we do. And we get very comfortable with that. And that's why it's harder down the road, as you'll see coming up. At this age group, your kids are going to approach you with questions. They need to question. They just got to the planet. They're not sure how it works. And so they're going to be questioning you. You have to stop and answer those questions, or give them a tool for how to be patient. And then you have to be consistent and come straight back and answer that question. So, and a tool would be, I hear you. You need to take a seat for a minute. I'll be right with you when I hang up this phone. And that'd be that. And if you do that consistently, John's broken record method, I hear you, sit down. I will be with you after I hang up the phone. You won't get that too many times. You won't get but mom. But you need to set that right away. But those questions are important. And they need to have your attention and your concern in regard to those questions. So you can't just go, gosh, you're asking questions about everything. They need to know that, again, they just got here. They also need to assert their imagination and creativity and practice role play. So when your kids come up, my middle daughter would come up, and about every other week, she had a new name for me and a new role that I was going to play in her imaginary afternoon. And so I would ask her, what my name was and what's my job, do I have any magic powers, whatever. And I would just play with her, because she needs to be able to think that out, think that whole role out. It's like the beginning of storytelling. And storytelling is one of our critical tools for communication. So we have to let them assert their imagination, and we have to play with it with them. And then the other thing is, at this age, they need models, visuals, practice taking turns, and they need to be able to express their needs clearly. That's why when your child is very young and points at something, we will go get it, right? They're 0 to a year. We will probably go get it. I would go get it and bring it back to them. But when they're 2, I'm going to walk over there and say, do you want your bottle? Bottle? You want bottle? Okay, mom's going to get the bottle. I'm getting the bottle. I'm bringing it to you. Here you go. Again, I just want to share that Clay didn't speak at all till he was 2. I mean, really, we were concerned. But his father worked a month on and a month off. And when he was home, he would take Clay to shopping with him and everything. And he just talked to him, constantly talked to him. Just, hey, buddy, what do you want? You want this or that or blah, 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 blah. And so when Clay started talking, it was very clear, very articulate, no baby talk, which was entirely different from my other 2 children. But yeah, so John?
Yeah, I think that when their ages, in that 6, 7, 8, 9 range, there are a couple things. They're very demanding of your attention, and so when Liz mentioned my broken record technique, that's a particularly effective tool, and it can be infused with humor, but it can also be just direct. I can't give you my undivided attention right now. I need 5 minutes, and I'll be able to answer your question. And then just then that is your script, and you don't move from that script. Why do people do things? Because they get results, and if they don't get the results that they need, they stop doing those things. And the other really, really critical skill that you can employ when you're not ready to have a conversation is, wait for it, ignoring. All right. Because ignoring impulsive behavior is one of the key strategies that we encourage families to utilize when they're trying to manage and deal with impulsive behavior. And so if they're pulling on your pant leg, constantly, and that doesn't work, then that can become an effective way to not communicate until you're ready to do so. Also, if any of you have read Tom Phelan's 1, 2, 3 Magic, I holding up a finger, letting them know that you want them to stop without engaging verbally can also be a really good way to manage and deal with some of those communications. At some point, though, you're going to have to engage, and your kids have to trust that you will circle back and engage, so that can be productive and effective.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the 3 things you just mentioned, the broken record, and the broken record, and then holding up the fingers and so forth, that it can morph into that. I mean, after a while, you can just give your kids the look and they know. But you have to be consistent to start with, or the look does nothing, they have to know. So yeah, as they grow, their language becomes more subtle. The language that they live in, right, becomes more subtle, more social, and vocabulary becomes more expansive. So it's a huge learning curve for our kids. They require understanding things like, and these things are going to come up in their lives at this age, sarcasm versus humor. You've all had the kids who have come home and said, Johnny called me a monkey face or whatever. And I had this with one of my friend's kids who we were babysitting. We went ice skating and a kid skated past him and said, you have a monkey face. And the kid just broke down. He was so sad. And he came to tell me and everything. And my youngest daughter came up and said, what's happening? What's happening? And he said, well, that guy out there said, I have a monkey face. And he said, well, you're supposed to say, you are a monkey, And he went, oh, okay. And then he went back out there and started, trying to get caught up with him. So there's rules to sarcasm. There's rules to humor at that age. And our kids don't necessarily pick up on it. So put downs versus constructive criticism, our kids get lost in that too, because this age group, put downs are a big deal, and they can be funny, and they if you can roll with it, it can be used to your advantage almost to deflect actual put downs. But then they get caught up when any criticism comes their way. Right? Any criticism becomes scary. And the other thing is our kids are criticized often in subtle ways. And so we have to realize that sensitivity to that. And that sensitivity to that is huge when they're in this age group, because this is a time of development in their lives when being social is number one. Having a peer group is number one. And so learning these subtleties and learning how to fit into that peer group is critical. So social cues are more subtle. They have to figure that out. That's a full-time job. A lot of our kids, when they walk into a classroom or a crowded place, they're overwhelmed immediately by all of the input that is so subtle that they're not sure, or they're just oblivious to it and they just walk right in and walk up to somebody and start talking without any intro. So that's a skill that they can learn. How to express emotion in appropriate ways. Our kids tend to use emotion as a communication for longer than most, okay? And so how to express their emotion with words through a more appropriate communication way, in appropriate ways, is something they need to be working on at this age group. And they need time to ponder and listen to and deconstruct stories. So they need to hear your stories and they need to be able to tell you their stories. That will help them express their experience in words before they get to that frustration level and do the fallback into emotional communication. So when do we get together with our kids? And this is going to be pretty obvious for a minute here, but I think it's important. You need to have a regularly scheduled time for talking where you are undividedly available for your kids. And I know that's difficult for a lot of families. It's at dinner time. And that's why the research empirically shows that families who have dinner time together, those kids do better in school and in life because they've learned those language skills that are passed around at dinner time. Or let them schedule a time, hey mom, let's spend some special time after school or after practice. Let's have, maybe you plan a snack every day at that time and you can just sort of sit around that. But at the very least, check in daily. Let me know when you have time to talk. I want to see how your day's going. I want to get caught up on what you've been doing. What's a good time? And again, dinner time roundtable is really great. And I would suggest starting with the dinner time talks. And we've talked about this in the past too, John, about family meetings are an excellent place to start as well. But dinner time talking can happen early, and it should happen early, starting in the 0 to 9s, and then keep it going as long as they're at home and make that a safe place. And we're going to talk about safety and really how to build that rapport here next.
I would add that when not to do this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say that, one of the greatest lessons I ever learned from a student, and often I would ask kids, hey, I'm a dad, do you have any advice for me as a dad? And it would open up the conversation for kids to share some things. And this one young lady once shared something with me and it just rocked my world. She said, when you come home from work, what's the first thing you do? Do you get on to your kid about something that you've seen or demand that they give you feedback or instruction on the day? Because if you do, because my parents do that, then when they hear the garage door open, instead of thinking, Daddy's home, they think, oh no, Dad is home. And it absolutely cut me to my core, because I would come home and demand to know how the day had gone. I would talk about issues that I saw as soon as I walked in. And so knowing when not to do that is really critical. I have
Oh, sorry, but we're going to talk about that here in just a second, because what you're doing is talking to them, talking to them. What we're trying to do today is talk about how not to do that exactly, and how to build rapport so that your child is not overwhelmed. But so I appreciate that. That is exactly the not thing we want you to do. The thing we want you not to do. See, I can fool with my language. Does that help, John, going forward? So, yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Do you have more?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So how, the main thing is when you set this time to visit with them and you want to come together with them, how do we do that in a way that is not what John described, right? It is not talking at them and so forth. And the how is show genuine interest in their interests, okay? This was difficult for my husband when my son was growing up, because my son was all about dirt bikes. And my husband was not all about dirt bikes. And it was hard for him to be patient and listen about dirt bikes because it scared him. Dirt bikes scared my husband. As far as, if you knew my son, he's going to take every risk possible on that dirt bike. And so even when Dad would go out and watch him, it would scare him. So it was hard for him to show genuine interest in that interest. But when we talked about it, he was able to say to my son, it scares me. Help me understand what you like about it. Let's work together how we can figure a way that I can feel you're safe enough that I can enjoy this with you. And so they worked it out, and that was when he was about 13 or 14. So show genuine interest in their interest, even if you're not interested in it. You would be surprised what your kids can share that will be amazing. Be curious about what they perceive as their strengths and challenges. Just curious, like, what did you do today that was so amazing? And let them tell you what they felt was amazing about what they did today. And what was tough today? What was really tough for you today? And let them define that. That's teaching them how to use their words rather than their emotions, putting words to their emotions. I feel good about this, and I feel so good about that, okay? Talk about common interests when you watch a movie together or you're eating food together or whatever. I just learned the other day that my son hates Brussels sprouts. And I learned it because we never had Brussels sprouts when he was growing up. It just wasn't a thing. We just didn't do it. And I made some grilled Brussels sprouts, and I thought that was great. And he said, Mom, was Brussels sprouts your choice? And I went, yeah. I go, do you like them? And he goes, no, not at all. And we talked about Brussels sprouts and all the way back to things when he first discovered that there were foods that he liked and didn't like. And that was when he was about 9. So I thought that whole thing was really interesting. Ask your child's help in solving a problem. So wouldn't that be better if you came home from work and you had something that was a problem going on? I can't think of anything right now. Maybe the dishwasher isn't working or something. And you asked your kids can anybody come in here and give me a hand with this? Our number one that we're always asking them to help us with is our phones, right? What's going on with this phone? I can't get my text messages, whatever. They love that, and it starts a point of conversation. Ask them to share a story that they love with you. Any story about anything. Being able to start a story, get to the middle of it, keep your audience's attention, and get to the end of it and wrap it up for everybody is a skill. They'll need that when they're learning to write. They'll need it when they're making friends and sharing experiences. So ask them to share a story with you that they love. Even if it's a recap of a Disney movie, that's okay. All right. And I wanted to share this because this is 2 quotes by Ross Greene, and lately I've been kind of looking into Ross Greene. And the thing, and John knows him really well, The thing that he said that I thought was really important for us today was that the long-term answer to a kid not caring about your concerns is to care more about his concerns. So that's why that last slide, you want to start with what are they interested in? What are their stories? What is happening in their world? Again, back to John foreshadowing, we need to walk in another person's shoes, in this case, our children's shoes, in order to build rapport with them, okay? And then the other piece that I thought Ross Green said really well was that most behavior problems are due to lagging skills or unsolved problems. And communication is the number one skill that if we lag in it, we will have more problems, more unsolved problems. The other thing I wanted to say real quick about how these relate to today is that the expressive and receptive language disorder that I was talking about earlier, not being able to find the words I need or not being able to understand the words you used, both also are expressed when a kid is very anxious or when they are depressed. So anxiety and depression will also cause those language delays to bubble up. And I think that's important because a lot of times our kids are anxious because they have problems that they haven't solved, that they're not sure how to approach. And that will literally cause a communication deficit. So I can't see what the title of this is. What does that say? But what it's about is pay attention. When you're talking to your child, I want you to pay attention to, do they have lagging skills? Are there some lagging skills that you're seeing, either articulation or expression or reception or something? And are there any unsolved problems that might be buzzing around with them that you're just not quite aware of? Pay attention for those two things. Those are the two things that they're going to have the most difficulty expressing. They don't know if they're lagging skills, so you're going to have to pay attention and notice that. And then if they have unsolved problems and lagging skills, they're going to have difficulty telling you that, okay? So here's the thing I really want to talk about, and John was sort of alluding to earlier, and that is when we talk to our kids, we really have to be careful how often, and that's supposed to be are you, sorry about that, how often are you making a request or doling out a consequence? If 50% of the time that when you talk to your kids, that's what you're doing, that's too much. That's too much. It's depending, again, on their developmental level, it's a little bit more appropriate for the younger kids, but it gets to be less appropriate as your child grows. And then I want you to think about how often are you open and receptive? How often can they find you in a place where they know they can walk in and you are 100% available to them? How often does that happen? And I know as a mother of three, it is difficult to find that time in the day, but it doesn't have to be a long time. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, over coffee, that's it. But check yourself. Be empathetic. Listen to their thoughts and try to relate to their stage in life. Again, we're walking in their shoes. This is about them and our need to help them develop their skills so that they will have autonomy and independence in the future. The need for expression is universal. So tell them stories and they will tell you their stories. And again, this is evolutionary, how communication started. And it's okay if we're not there yet, if we're not there yet, to build some rules of engagement. And these are the rules that I quietly tell myself when I go to listen to my adult daughter, because I can't be coercive. She's an adult. It's her life. But I have to go, okay, just be kind, just be patient, and be polite. Okay, I hear what you're saying. Instead of, and when I say polite, sometimes our faces give it away, where you're going, oh, and then the kids go, Mom, that's the same thing as sort of fussing at them. So, or at least for my kids, it is from me. And how do we be receptive when we do have those moments of receptivity? How do we be that? And the first thing is to realize, again, back to this walking in their shoes, is to be egoless. It is not about you. We want our kids to be able to talk and communicate to us, to each other, to new friends, and to the world. And so that's what we want for them. We already can do it. So we can listen and help them without our ego getting entangled in that. Okay. Another way is to repeat back what you heard, not only about the words, but the feelings and emotions behind the words, because that's what we can pick up on, those nonverbal cues. So when we're listening, we're also listening to those nonverbal cues that our kids are giving us. The next part is ask for clarification. It teaches them to ask for clarification. It helps them restate what it was they were saying in the first place. And it helps them broaden their depth of expressive language. Don't prepare your response while you're listening. And I can't tell you how many of us do that. While we're listening, before we even get to the end of their sentence listening, we're going, and so we have to be careful because we're preparing what we're going to say. Because sometimes we don't even need to say anything. It's really nice. They'll work it out themselves. We just need to be there. And being there builds rapport. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. Main thing is don't interrupt. If you interrupt, you're actually teaching interrupting. So don't interrupt. You can have a signal, and we have signals at our house if we have something to say. And we can, write it down. My son writes down his thoughts while we're talking to him because that just helps him remember his points. Put yourself in their shoes. That is absolutely number one. Turn taking is a learned skill. So we would say, okay, your turn. Here's what I think about the bonfire tonight. This is just my knee-jerk reaction about the bonfire tonight, Emily. This is what I'm thinking. And then I say what I'm thinking. Then I go, okay, your turn. You tell me what you're thinking. So I know we'll be on the same page. Turn taking has to be practiced. So we have to be able to stop in our story and give the other person a turn. We have to be able to stop and say, do you need clarification? Are you there? What's happening? So that turn taking, we need to practice. Some of the ways we can do that is, I hear what you're saying, and this is critical. I should have highlighted and, because most of the time we say, I hear what you're saying, but, and then off we go. It's better if we say, I hear what you're saying, and it's a completely different feel, right? If I say, but, then you're expecting criticism. Our kids are completely allergic to criticism. So when we say, but, we've lost. Okay? Be honest about your thoughts and feelings because you want them to be honest about their thoughts and feelings. So you want to be honest about your thoughts and feelings, and you want to say, honey, going to this bonfire kind of scares me. It just scares me. I'm just mom, and that's what it does. So here's some ideas that maybe if we could come together, you could do this, and I would feel better about that. And we did. We came to some mutual agreement about how it needed to look. The other thing, again, we talked about unsolved problems. Our kids will come to us with unsolved problems, and that's great. It's hard sometimes because you just hate, your heart hurts for your kids, and it's hard. But again, it's egoless. This is for them. How may I help you? So you want to know what the issue is, and then you want to ask them, what do you need from me to help you solve this issue? Because I believe you're capable of solving this issue. what part of this can I help you with? What do you need from me? The other thing they need to be reminded of often is that we're all on the same team. We're all on the same team. If this is your problem, I am here to help you because I am on your team. I'm not going to, take that time to say, well, if you would have blah, 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 this wouldn't have blah, 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 because that's not what they're asking. They're trying to be honest and work through and find their solution with your help, which is totally developmentally appropriate. And some words you can say are, that sounds like a big idea, that you just told me. What would be step 1, step 2, step 3? And I'm always saying that, I repeat that all the time, because our kids need to be able to break down their thinking, because when everything's coming in at once, it's hard to organize. So this helps our kids organize step 1, step 2, step 3, which helps them get that sort of longer term vision and build in some patience and slow down the impulsivity. John?
Collaboration requires, however, trust, and trust can only be gained when, as you're working through this process, you clearly are trying to be collaborative. And which, again, you mentioned Ross Green, and his idea of collaborative parenting is just so spectacular, because you are trying to get to the same location, but not in a way that is adversarial. When you find yourself in a situation that is becoming adversarial, and again, you're doing a great job, Liz, of talking about what to do, but sometimes the pitfalls are the things that you shouldn't do. And when things become conflictual, then the conversations typically, one person shuts down. I also find that some of the most productive collaborative conversations I've ever had were because we were doing something together.
Yeah.
Maybe as simply as, from the movie Field of Dreams. Hey, Dad, you want to have a catch? And, throwing the ball back and forth, or a Frisbee back and forth, or going for a walk and talk. Sometimes those can, when you're not looking at each other face to face, engaged in an intense conversation, can really open up the ideas to feeling like you're on the same team and trying to be collaborative and how to figure out a solution together versus what is sometimes a more adversarial relationship.
Right. And if you're just building these skills, you want to keep in mind that your child is going to have those buttons. They're going to, if you've been adversarial before, building that trust is going to take a little time. That's why in the last slide I said, I hear what you're saying, and rather than I hear what you're saying, but, because just those little things will start that cycle that John just mentioned. So thanks, John. That went really well. Empathy is the heart of it. And so for you personally, you as a parent, you have to set the stage, and exactly what John said. You have to have a conscious intention to be there for your child, to listen to them, to look out for skill deficits and help them back it up a little bit and fill in the blanks, without being adversarial. That your intentions are pure, and your actual goal is the same as your child's. Excuse me. And you really need to keep that in mind, that both of you, your child and you, want your child to grow up and be autonomous and independent, and to have the best skills possible. So you are on the same team because the objective is the same for both of you. The problem is we sometimes forget that they, in order to be autonomous and independent, we have to give them the tools to be in control, okay? We have to give away our control to our child by teaching them those skills. And that's very hard developmentally as a parent. Again, I said to my husband last night, I think the hardest stage is when they're adults, because you really have to cut the cord and let things happen. So when you're getting ready to talk to your child, and this only takes a matter of seconds really, be sure that you kind of review for yourself, okay, what's my intention here? I am here to help. I am here to help. Check in with your thoughts and your body. If you're tense, you're going to go into control mode. All right, we've got a problem. Let's handle this. All right, we got this. No, don't want to be there. You want to be soft and receptive, soft and receptive. You want to walk in their shoes. Remind yourself of how you were at that age. You were difficult to talk to because of the developmental level, because friends were more important than anything else. That's normal. So allow it. And then listen from your inner child, as John said. And listen and respond from your heart, not your head, from your heart and that inner child that you carry with you as well. So take the time. I think time is the most precious gift of all. We've talked about love languages in the past, I think briefly, and just spending time with your kid can be the most precious gift that you can ever give them, okay? So they know you're proud of them, they know you love them, but just spending some time with them. And that is the number one key to starting building that trust and building that rapport. And so we've come to the end of our time here. I've come to the end of my time with SOAR, and I'm going to be, this is my last webinar, but I wanted you all to have my contact information. I'm still available and I'm still doing work in the field. So if you don't have my contact information, there it is. And of course, Big John is right there in his chair, always at the helm, at the lead, and will always be there as going forward. So are there any questions, any comments, concerns, thoughts?
Well, there were a couple. There was a question that was someone wrote, John, that was a good point. I asked my son how his day is going when he gets in the car. It makes sense. He never wants to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things I wanted to say earlier and didn't have a chance to was that sometimes a really good way to do so is to ask more specifically pointed questions.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of what did you learn at school, say, you know, did you learn a new science fact today that you'd like to share with me?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, what was the best thing that one of your friends did for you or said to you today? And that can get the conversation started.
Right.
And then Liz, this comment is for you from Pierre, and I'm sure Gail as well. Thank you so much, Liz, for your very practical tips that greatly helped me to understand my daughter and have a better relationship. And on behalf of all of us at SOAR, Liz, it has been an absolute pleasure, and we deeply appreciate your energy and investment in our families. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been really fun. I really enjoy everyone, and I'm going to stop the share right there. And so, yeah, going forward, I think it's going to be lovely. John is right there with everybody. And again, if you have any questions or want to contact me at all, you know, feel more than free to do so. And keep your eye out. We'll be doing some fun things in the future. So, yeah. So, so that was it. And I'm good.
Before you go, Liz, I just
Yeah.
want to I would like to share next month's webinars.
Yeah.
At 2 p.m. On the 7th, I'm going to do a workshop called "It's Not Fair: 5 Ways to Overcome a Limited Perspective."
Mm-hmm.
On the 14th, I'm going to do a workshop on the art of self-advocacy, helping kids find their voice. On the 21st, I'm going to do a webinar on stubborn or tenacious, the power of persistence. And then on the 28th, I'm going to do a webinar on support systems and how they make all of the difference.
That is super. That is super. Those are great topics. Okay, John, well, thank you again. I'm sure we'll be in touch, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
All right. Bye, folks.
Bye.